Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the panel on Central and Eastern European investments with a gender and impact lens. I have the pleasure of welcoming to my panel today Elina, Shruti, Gregor, and Patric. And perhaps just to kickstart, if everyone could just introduce themselves for 1 minute, that would be absolutely fantastic. I'm the founder of European Women in VC and general partner of Experior, and I have the pleasure of moderating this panel this afternoon. So maybe Elina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elina Halatcheva. I'm a managing partner of BrightCap Ventures, which is a tech-focused seed and Series A VC fund based in Sofia. We are 25 million euro investment fund backed by the European Investment Fund as an anchor investor. We're sector agnostic. We invest mostly in tech companies in the software, B2B enterprise sector. And my background has mostly been in investing in finance and also in starting a B2B procurement startup.
Brilliant. Thanks, Elina. Shruti?
Sure, happy to go next. Kinga, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm Shruti Chandrasekhar. I work at the IFC and I lead some of our fund of funds programs, including one where we invest in early stage funds on the venture capital side to promote the development of VC ecosystems across emerging markets. The other hat that I wear, which is sort of the reason why Kinga has me here today, is I focus on our gender initiatives across our private equity and venture capital program across our emerging markets. And some of these are research partnerships or thought leadership pieces. And then other aspects of it is we try to bring a gender lens into the PE and VC investments that we do across the organization. So very nice to meet you all. In terms of my quick background, I've been in the private equity and venture capital space for over 15 years now. So very glad to meet everyone on the panel and also at some point. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Shruti. And Gregor?
Hi, everyone. My name is Gregor Knesebeck. I'm representing Blue Future Partners today. I'm very happy to join, especially regarding the initiative, which is about to come up, how Kinga and I got introduced around women in VC. We're a fund of fund based in Munich and Berlin at the moment, with an office in Hong Kong. We have a global mandate investing in early stage managers, actually sector agnostic, and the more time we spend, we've got 25 manager relationships at the moment, and the more time we spend in the space, we've been looking out for diversity and integrating kind of all sorts of new models in venture capital. So we're very happy kind of to support initiatives around D&I, ESG, and so forth. Thanks for having us today.
Thank you. And Patric?
Yes, so I'm Patric Gresko. Thank you, Kinga, for inviting me to this panel, and thank you for the organizers as well. So I'm Patric Gresko. I represent the European Investment Fund. So the European Investment Fund is the venture capital arm of the European Union. We act as a fund of fund investor. So we invest in VC funds, which invest in companies. So we're focused on the EU 27. We invest across all sectors, all countries of the EU 27. And at EIF, I'm particularly in charge of impact investing, so social impact, environmental impact funds, life sciences, and Central and Eastern European region in general. And with regards to my background, well, 1st of January this year, I celebrated my 20 years at EIF. So I've been on the VC market for the last 15, 16 years.
Brilliant. So thank you very much for joining this important panel. I see I have a great setup, which is really great. And I guess, you know, in a way, I wish we didn't have to speak about diversity and gender at all in the VC ecosystem. But since we are here, and panel discussions are always the most interesting when they are a bit controversial. And I wanted to start with a thesis that the VC and the startup ecosystem is one of the least gender diverse areas of the economy. And to just give some background on that, in Europe, only around 2% of money is being invested in female-led startups. And actually in CEE, it seems less from our recent studies, it's around 1%. And even with mixed teams, that's still going to be a single-digit number. And if we move towards VC space, female-led VCs is around 3% of VCs in Central Europe. And even if we add mixed teams, we'll still be at around 13%. And what is even more troublesome is that female-led general partners are raising far less capital than their male counterparts, and they have around a fifth of the firepower of male-led VCs. And even if we take mixed teams in account, that's still going to be a third of the firepower of male-led. So that's the gist of the data for CEE. So I'd like to ask each one of you, what do you think is going on? What are you seeing? And I thought that maybe I start with Shruti because she's got the most, I guess, helicopter global view of the ecosystem, taking into account also her role in other emerging markets. Could you talk a little bit from the high level, Shruti?
Me too. The sad state of affairs is that this is a problem everywhere. So typically when we're working in the emerging markets at the IFC, we can often look to the developed markets to see how things have gotten better in the developed markets and take lessons and translate them to emerging markets. But this is a space where that doesn't hold true because the lack of diversity, you see it in California, you see it in developed Europe, you see it in Africa, you see it in South Asia. It's truly a global problem, and it's particularly enhanced for private equity because oftentimes we, what we hear, but there's a lack of diversity in other sectors as well, especially in senior roles. And so one of the things that we looked at around a year and a half ago when we did a piece of work that looked across our emerging markets is we looked at senior leadership in private equity and venture capital. So it wasn't just venture capital, it was also private equity. By region for the PEVC market versus other industries, right? And looking at senior leadership across other industries. And PE and VC is significantly worse than other industries. And so just, because we were focused on the CEE region, with this particular call, I looked at what we term as our ECA region, which is Eastern Europe and Central Asia. And what we had found is when we looked at senior professionals, and this is a little bit dated, so numbers could have changed since then, around 10% of senior professionals in private equity and venture capital were women. And we only looked at investment roles, right? So we didn't look at, head of legal or head of HR or value creation or any other roles within a private equity or a venture capital firm. So we're primarily looking at investment partners. And when we looked at similar senior roles, C-level roles in other industries, and we got the data from Grant Thornton, that was 38% for the ECA region. So it's 10% for private equity and venture capital and 38% for other sectors, right? So there's something that we're not doing right in the PE and VC ecosystem. And then the second key thing that we also noticed is that where we had more women partners, we saw more investments going into women-led companies. And it's still, we still have room to improve, but we saw that if it was a male partner leading a transaction, around 7% of the transactions that they did were in female-led companies. But if the partner leading the transaction was female, then we saw 13% of the underlying companies were female-led. Still, the numbers are very low, but it was higher when you had women investment professionals. And this was across emerging markets, right? So it wasn't specific to a certain region or, have the impact of certain cultural influences, because, when people talk about different regions, there are different factors influencing participation of women in the labor force. But it was something that we saw across regions, and it is really disappointing to see the data, but it's not surprising for those of us who are in the industry. So Kinga, I don't know if I gave enough of a bird's eye view, but that's sort of what we saw, and we're trying to figure out ways to address it. But it's a problem that we see everywhere.
Yes, and IFC has also covered it recently last year together with CBC in an extensive report on women right across emerging markets, which I also highly recommend to everyone to have a look at. So maybe moving over to Gregor, who has also a global view, but at the same time has invested not just in emerging markets, but also the emerged markets, and backed a numerous number of female-led initiatives. So could you tell us a little bit, Gregor, what you are seeing from your view, from the place that you are investing into and the projects you are looking at?
Absolutely, happy to share. So I think the sad thing is I can only confirm that the same thing, the data we looked at, or the funds we looked at, represent exactly these numbers. So we went through an analysis of round about 1,400 funds in the last 6 years now. We started out in 2015, and all the diligence we did, and this is focusing on funds mainly sub 200 million funds. So we have a pretty specific kind of angle what we're looking at. And mixed teams, you'll find around 10% or so, and female only teams you look at will be hardly not to be found. We actually did back a firm recently in the US, an female-only led team, and actually I got off the phone in the morning today with a call, manager pitching 3 women, so it was quite a refreshing kind of opener for the day today, having this discussion. So I think we do see more and more of these decks popping up for us, and I don't really have anything more to say on stats. We all totally agree on that it's not right the way it's represented in the industry at the moment. What I really want to focus on in our kind of research and endeavor is to really understand why this is the case. And I think the discussion would be, or interesting discussion from our side to be had within the community, is really to understand why. I mean, from a fundraising point of view, I think female teams are having a good shot at the moment because everybody will at least look at their deck just because of the diversity. So I just want to understand why these GPs, or female GPs, why there are not more of them out there.
Thank you so much, Gregor. So maybe moving over to Patric, who's got the view of Europe, but then also going down to Central and Eastern European region. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you are seeing in terms of female-led VCs or co-led VCs, and what is in EIF's portfolio in terms of female-led VCs and co-led?
No, from our perspective, unfortunately, the picture is not much brighter than what Shruti and Gregor have just depicted. The statistics are also applicable at European level. So we looked at the investments we've made in 2013, and we've counted the number of partnerships which had at least one female in the partnership, and that amounted to 13% of our investments. It got a bit better in 2018. That's the most recent statistics that we could dig out. Was this number increased to 30%. So roughly today, 1/3 of the funds that we're investing in have at least one female partner in the partnership, but it's one amongst many. So the female partners remain a very underrepresented part of the population in the VC and the private equity industry. So I can only resonate the analysis and the numbers that Shruti has put forward. This being said, we see that the landscape is changing, and there are, I think, here some differences from a geographical perspective. I think that there has been a number of funds established in the Nordics who have committed to change that situation. And the first step they have taken is to raise the awareness by simply making it public, the number of not only female employees and partners that they have in their own firm, but also publicize the number of female entrepreneurs that they have in their portfolio companies. And clearly there, the balance is still negative, but the fact that there are a number of VC players who are willing spontaneously to raise the awareness is something. We're also, and here we lack statistics, but from my personal observation, we have seen in the last 36 months a growing number of female profiles who have been promoted to partner level in traditional VC funds. And again, this is mainly concentrated in the Nordics, in the UK, in France as well. And last remark, as a matter of fact, it's not impossible. We have in our portfolio a fund called JATO. It's a life sciences fund, first-time team, first-time fund. Not only are they a first-time team, first-time fund, but it's a woman-led team which has raised one of the largest funds for life sciences startups across Europe. So as a summary, the picture is not positive, but we see here and there some trends which are picking up and that we would like to encourage going forward. But I think that will be the topic of the next question that you will raise, Kinga.
Brilliant. And going towards a fund and how it is to set one up and fundraise, Elina, can you tell us your story and the challenges you've had from your perspective?
Sure. I can actually give a bit of a rosier picture. I think Bulgaria is one of the few countries that have two funds with a female partner, and even though it may seem like a low number compared to the single-digit total number of funds in Bulgaria, I think that's still a large percentage of the total. And the reason for that is maybe because Bulgaria historically has been very strong in tech and sciences. You probably know we have 53% of all scientists and engineers are women, about 50% of all managers. We have a lot of the top international tech companies and banks having a female leader in a top position. So that in a way has created the emergence of more and more funds with female either investment people in investment in decision-making positions, or investment managers, the lower positions. So overall, I think we have a bit of a better position relative to other countries in Europe. But having said that, I still think there's a lot to be done. I also came across a survey that analyzed female VCs in the US, which were at about 6%. And as Kinga has pointed out, in Europe, that's still lagging a lot behind. And the reason for that, I think, is, I mean, we have to address a undisputable psychological premise is that investors basically look to support founders that mirror themselves. So GPs invest in LPs that mirror them, and LPs invest in turn in companies that resonate with them. So I feel like if we have more female investors, that will create the emergence also of more female founded companies, which will address those specific needs to females and other, you know, social and health related issues that female founders address. I also read a survey done by Women in VC that female investors are 2 times more likely to invest in startups with one female founder, and 3 times more likely to invest in a female CEO. So having more female investors would mean more female founded and mixed gender startups. And I can guarantee you that the 2 female led funds in Bulgaria definitely see a lot more of those female founded and mixed gender founded investments than other VC funds in the region. So that's a good trend for us here locally.
Can you tell us about your process, fundraising, how that was, and you know, what you would like to see when you're next fundraising?
Sure. So our team is comprised of 3 full-time partners. There are 2 male partners and myself, and we also have a venture partner who's a female as well. So if you look at the composition, we're 50-50, so that provides for some diversity, which I think is great. Also because diverse teams, you know, it's proven they actually generate higher returns. So not only are they addressing problems that female founders specifically solve, but they also generate higher returns. In terms of fundraising, as I mentioned, EIF is our anchor investor. So they provided about 70% of the funding in our fund, and we're able to raise an additional 30% from partners and people that we've worked with before through our network. So that's, I think if we have an anchor investor, like a public money institution that leads the way and gives mandates to female-led or mixed gender-led VCs, that will create the emergence of other followers that will see the benefits of diverse teams.
Brilliant. Okay, so I think we identified where we are at, the state of the market right now. Surely COVID is only making things worse for women. It's not making it better. We know that Europe is really reaching its heights in terms of both VC investment and new commitments going to funds. 2020 was a very good year all in all, and even the first quarter was also very good. However, if anything, for women, it's actually gotten worse. Now, women researchers are publishing less research papers. Women founders are raising less and creating less companies. Surely no one's done a study about female-led VCs, but they must be in the same trend, or no. So COVID is only making the situation more and more challenging. So in that ecosystem, in that status, what can we do? What can be our strategies to even this out, to make it more balanced, to do new things and old things, but to speed up the pace of change? So maybe starting again with Shruti, what would you recommend?
It's a tough question, Kinga, and it's you know, what you say is absolutely true in terms of impact of COVID, especially with the role the women have to take on, with schools being closed and other external services being. What we have tried to do, and this is something that we were doing even before COVID hit, but something that we're putting more effort on, is to not make this a problem that needs to be solved just by women. Right, because for us to get to gender equality, we need men to participate and push the agenda as well. And so when we're thinking about how do we incorporate a gender lens, we're thinking about how do we incorporate a gender lens irrespective of who the firm is, right? You know, if it's a company or a fund, what are the types of things that they can do that would help them move towards gender balance? And how can we help them in that approach? And so the way we've been thinking about it is sort of through the stack, like, you know, women in leadership, women as employees, women as consumers, women as suppliers and distributors to the businesses that venture capital companies and venture capital firm has invested in. And then if there are any community implications, thinking about that as well. And trying to see, can we start making a change in every one of those aspects, right? And we've been having conversations across the board with our direct investment portfolio. We're invested in sort of more, I'd say later stage startups, on average Series C and beyond, as well as with our funds portfolio, where we have a very broad range of funds, from very small emerging managers to very large established growth equity players. And what we're seeing is that it varies by firm, but there is a growing interest in trying to address this problem. And just by virtue of, like, even if you look at our panel today, we have Gregor and Patric, two men who are interested in this conversation and interested in making a difference. And that's a change that we've seen a lot more, I'd say, over the past 12 to 18 months than we did before. So I don't know if that's an impact of COVID, of people seeing that it's more challenging for women in these times, or if it's just the entire sort of world has become a little bit more woke. But we're seeing change being more readily accepted. Like early on, you know, 4 years ago, when we'd have the conversation with our fund managers or with our companies saying, you need to start thinking about diversity. You might not be diverse at this point, but as you hire, can you build a more diverse team? There are benefits to doing that. There was always pushback. Oh, is that reverse discrimination? Is that, you know, is that going to be sort of a social cause I take up that will impact my financial performance? And that rhetoric, we're hearing less and less. We're actually hearing, fund managers and companies come to us and say, this is something that I think will improve my top line and bottom line. Can you help me figure out a way to handle it, right? And it's also like previously we try to work with funds and say, can you think about this in terms of your portfolio? Can you think about a proactive way? We're not saying this is like, a requirement, but can you set a target in terms of how much capital you're going to deploy to women-founded companies? An internal target, not something that's to be shared with the world, but something that you can work towards so you can build change. And there was always pushback, but now we have this conversation and we suggest a target, and the fund manager comes back to us with saying, no, we think we can do better, right? So I think the conversation is changing. I don't know if it's the impact of COVID or just the impact of times, but it's been a positive development, and we're starting to see not a lot. And Elina is completely right. It's 2 firms is not a lot, but we're starting to see that, right? Before it was 0, and so from 0 to 2 is an infinite change, and so we're starting to see that delta, even in terms of the pipeline that's coming across and the conversations that we're having.
Okay. And actually, as Shruti pointed out, it's great to have men also speaking on this panel and interested in this topic. Gregor, I know that Blue Future is doing a lot around ESG initiatives as a whole. And of course, gender diversity is a part of that. But maybe you could just talk more around, your initiatives around ESG and how this fits into future potential action.
Absolutely. So the initiative mentioning is something we started as a really side project actually last year, which we just hashtagged as ESG in VC. In the beginning, we were trying to better understand the ESG practices funds were pitching us. And so obviously we got to see a lot of approaches people had, and we couldn't quite make sense of what we saw. And so we tried to dive deeper and started discussions with people to better understand. Obviously, you learn from other people who have been out there longer. And somehow we got the idea, why don't we share this with the community? So we just launched this interview series, sharing the discussions we were having with other people. And obviously, like if you buy an electric car or something, you'll be walking around and seeing electric cars all over the place. Similar thing happened with the ESG thing, let's say. So the more we were talking to people, the more kind of networks we were kind of tapping and is trying to figure out what people were doing. We obviously, as a sub-bucket, also had a lot of discussions around diversity and integration. And I think relating this to the COVID question, Kinga, you were asking earlier, I think from our point of view, and I see this kind of as a great opportunity actually on the COVID side when it comes to venture capital funds, and also obviously for startups. We all agree on if the venture funds are kind of more female dominated, they will pick more startups which are kind of run by women. So if we look at this as an LP on LP of LPs, we try to just figure out how can we get people to improve the fundraising process, right? And I think for women, even if you go with this view of women taking care of the family, so they can travel less and they can't really kind of go and fundraise as their male partners could. I think that doesn't hold true anymore because via Zoom, right? This is a totally new situation. And I remember just 1 year back when this all broke out, we all had this discussion, will we ever be able to invest in a new fund manager if we can't travel, right? We invest in China and we couldn't travel to China, so we were thinking, well, we can't do this. And 12 months down the line, obviously with LPAC approval and so forth, but we deployed money in China without having actually met physically. We do more references and we try to get the process adjusted accordingly. But I think that's a huge opportunity. We're leveling the playing field with everyone, right? This is not only focusing on women. This is we're talking to people all over the place. It's much easier to actually raise a fund because you have less travel costs involved and so forth. So I see this as a big opportunity. And the second thing is from the LP stack. I am a firm believer that if your LPs and the LPs of the LPs will ask you the right questions and actually act by the questions they ask, everything else will happen by itself. So I think we need to talk to the LP community, make sure that they are aware of the benefits they have. And if they are financially driven, prove the point and tell them that female funds or female-run funds have better performance, or whatever if it's an ESG angle and you have a bucket of somebody deploying ESG money or impact money, whatever it is, try and find the right arguments and pitch right. So I think we should encourage discussion in the community to really get people to understand who am I talking to, who am I fundraising from, and what arguments can actually convince them. Because there's so many arguments too, obviously, that you just need to pick the right one.
Perfect. Patric, so in terms of, I guess, Europe, everyone looks towards EIF as a trendsetter. Surely in Central and Eastern Europe, EIF is the largest VC investor today already. What are the strategies that EIF is doing in this situation to help females? Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, sure, Kinga. So I'm happy that you're raising the question the way you're raising it. So asking us what will we do and not whether we will do something. I think that was the question some 4 or 5 years ago. The question was whether we were aware of the situation. No, we are aware of the situation. We want to play an active role in that because of the position of EIF, who were indeed a significant LP on the VC and private equity landscape. But the question is difficult, how to address the market from our perspective, how to address this market failure. And as a matter of fact, and you know, we are in discussions as we speak with the European Commission. The new programming period of the Commission has basically started, but we're still discussing the modalities of InvestEU. And as a matter of fact, under InvestEU, there will be a dedicated pocket of money focused on gender balance for the VC and private equity community. Now, how will we do that? We're discussing. We're discussing on what is the population that we want to address. Well, first of all, what is the situation today? What is the stock take today? And where do we want to bring the market in 4 to 5 years' time? And then once we have made that assessment, we will put in place a series of measures to get there. And what I can say from this series of measures is that there is a number of focus points on which we're digging into. The first one is and we have already invested in a number of funds which are women-led. So women-led VC funds, where the majority of the partnership is led by women. We also will be paying a particular attention to funds who will be investing with a focus on the diversity in general in their portfolio companies. But I think there is also a great opportunity to not only raise the awareness, and we're doing that through our ESG approach and asking the question to our fund managers on what do they do for ensuring a proper diversity in the partnership that they're responsible for, but there is an opportunity for improving the gender balance in the traditional VC and private equity community. We have seen, and as I've mentioned earlier, some improvements, some awareness raising in certain regions and specific verticals of the VC segment. We want to encourage that. We want to encourage VC and private equity traditional firms to increase the number of female partners, female profiles that they will have at the partner level, simply for the reason that Elina mentioned. Investors tend to mirror themselves into the investment that they are making. So if we manage to increase significantly the number of female partners in the traditional VC industry, we do believe that this will have a significant impact in the deal flow and in the composition of the boards, or the composition of the companies which are being invested by the VC funds.
Good. Elina, what would you like to see happen as an LP strategy so that this VC ecosystem can become more of a diverse one? What are the kind of strategies that maybe you're seeing elsewhere in the world that have worked well, or what could be interesting strategies? It's a good time, I guess, to suggest them.
From our side, what we try to do is we try to encourage female founders through different initiatives. And when we find a company to invest in, we always showcase it and give it as an example and a role model to other female founders. We also provide mentorship to those female founders because there was a survey done that said that there are 3 main roadblocks that female founders find in starting their companies. One of them is confidence. The other one is lack of technical skills that they have. So I mean, I think if we provide that guidance and mentorship and entrepreneurial insights for those women, they will be able to support them to be more confident and look for funding. In terms of what things can work and what policies should be and can be put in place, I think we can start from the top and from the bottom as well. Obviously, from the top, there are policies that can go on a countrywide level, like maternity and paternity leaves. In the Nordics, female and the mother and the father both have 1 year that they can spend at home with the kids, which provides more opportunities for female to continue working. The public money investing more actively in female investors, of course, as Patric mentioned. And at the employer level, gender pay equality incentives of employment to help balance work and home life, allowing men to fulfill new roles, promoting women to become role models, and having more female investors to eliminate the bias from the onset. And from the bottom, I think we can also start some initiatives, and those can start at the school. If we teach young kids that everything can be learned and there are no skills that are inherent to boys and girls. We can teach that at home as well. There are no roles that women and men have to fill in. So I think if we go from the top and from the bottom, I think we'll increase the number of female professionals in all different levels and professions.
Very good. Now, I have been asked to also encourage the audience to ask some questions, but we've already got some. The first one is about quotas. So, and this might be a question, first of all, to Shruti. What are your views on quotas at the GP level? Would you support them, not support them? Should they exist? Should they not exist? What would be your personal view on that?
My personal view. So I think targets are better than quotas because it's a more positive approach than sort of saying, you need to get here, and if you don't, there's consequence. Different countries have done it differently. So for example, in India a couple of years ago, they put in a requirement that every public listed company needs to have at least one board director who's female. And the public listed companies miraculously found female board members. And now every public listed female board member, right? And I know in Nigeria, they did something similar, but just for the financial sector. And it's led to the development of more senior female professionals, which I think has been good for the market as a whole. So, in those cases, quotas have worked, but sometimes it can be, it can have negative consequences because, and the example that comes to mind the most is, how affirmative action was handled in the US. And we've seen situations where, people could have achieved something on their own merit, but because, they were organizations that were pushing for affirmative action, the women or the minorities who are actually able to make it are now viewed in the same light because they're like, oh, you were only, you're only here because there's a requirement that you need to be here. So I think they are, it sort of downplays the merit that these individuals could have achieved. And so it's a fine balance. I think quotas are a very challenging way to go about it. What I've seen a lot of firms do is set requirements in their hiring process. So for example, for the final round of interviews, when they're trying to fill a position, they would require that at least, there's one woman on the, the final slate of 4 or 5 candidates, or there's one minority. And that has, I think, it forces you to look for candidates, but the end decision is still merit-based. And so it doesn't leave the candidate feeling like I only got this job because I was filling a quota, which is not great. But then it also encourages firms to think more openly about diversity. So those are tactics that we've seen that have worked quite nicely. Other things that I've heard firms use as strategies is at the junior level, sort of setting a policy that at the junior level, we will make an effort to have more diverse, like a more diverse pool of candidates, because now you're able to find high quality candidates, at least at the junior level. If at the senior level, it can still be challenging. So different firms have approached it in different ways. So in short, I'd say quotas are not an easy thing to do. I think it's much better to have a target and try and work towards it, and make your systems more compatible to achieving that, as opposed to sort of having like, this is a strict guideline, you have to achieve it, because then I think they could be negative consequences as well. But that's sort of my personal view based on what I've seen.
Well, from the point of view of investing in females and female-funded companies, Europe now under the new EIC initiative is targeting 40% of female-led as a part of EIC fund investments. So that's more of a target than a quota, but I guess with publicly funded, it's easier to set either quotas or targets than require that from the private sector. So question, Patric, you guys are publicly funded. How would you look at that? Would you set yourself a quota or say a target for 2021?
No, I think for the reasons that Shruti has explained very well, I think we're more gearing towards a target. As I said earlier, we would like to do a proper stock take now, look at the portfolio of funds that we have invested in, see what's the landscape today precisely, and define a target that we would achieve in 4 or 5 years time. If we would to impose quotas, we are already seen as quite of a demanding investor on the VC market, and not only because of our public nature. So if we come with another strings attached and we impose quotas on the funds that we're investing in, I think our popularity would not be positively impacted. But joke aside, I don't believe in quotas personally either. I find it as a very tough instrument and a double-edged instrument for the reason that Shruti mentioned. So to cut the answer short, no, we would clearly prefer position ourselves and define the targets that we would strive to meet.
Okay. There's another question, and it's a little bit about the relationship of who's investing and what they are backing, and the relationship of, I guess, females to men, and how many companies a female investor with female founders would they back, and what percentage would that be, higher or lower, and what the correlation could be. And what you are seeing. And I thought maybe I asked Gregor and Elina that question, starting with Gregor, because you have those funds that are female-led, and you are talking to a number of other ones. So have you seen this correlation clearly? Is it there?
So I don't actually have an analytics kind of in our database which would prove that, but just from my kind of feeling what I've seen, I do see a correlation. So I think depending on how many targets are out there, obviously you will allocate your capital, but there is a light skew to assume to you like kind of to support people who are similar to you rather than something you might not understand, or the kind of sales strategy and fundraising is differently also. I'm not sure to answer the question. I don't actually have the analytics. I will get that out of the database later on to verify.
And Elina, in terms of the way you approach different founders, mixed teams, diversity. Do you see that it's actually impacting the fact that you are a mixed team, that you are seeing more companies approach you as a result that are mixed? I know that you have also invested in female founders. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. We get a lot more female founders come to us. Mostly because, you know, they're solving problems that other females would understand. They're specific to women. Like the company, for example, that we've backed, it's a Spanish-based company founded by 2 females. They're a data science company that provides insights and help to women on health issues in their reproductive life, from fertility to menopause. So I would assume a man would not be able to understand those problems very well. So in terms of how many female-founded or mixed-gender founded companies we've seen, I think over the last 3 years, we've analyzed about 600 companies. And I'm sure the proportion of female-founded or mixed-gender founded companies is not that large, but it's still a bigger number than I would assume other male VC investors see. In terms of our portfolio, we've made 10 investments. One, as I said, which is 10%, is in an all-female founded company. We have another investment in a company that is mixed gender. So altogether, it's 20% of our portfolio, which I think is a great number to show.
Brilliant. Okay, I guess we're coming to the end now, but before we do that, I'd like to ask you one more question. Imagine that we meet again in 12 months' time. What would be the one thing that you would like to see changed, achieved, or what would be a dream scenario that we could talk about, you know, in 12 months when we recall these 12 months back? What would be a great thing to have happened? And anyone who can speak first, who wants to go? Shruti.
I can jump in. To me, what would be a nice change is to have more than half the managers that come to us for funding to have a team that includes at least one woman. That is not the case today, but that would be a nice change to see.
Brilliant. Gregor?
So basically, I think there has already been a great change, and it refers to my point earlier. Lowering the barriers kind of for fundraising for GPs. That's kind of our view of the world. I want this change to actually stay in place because I'm a little afraid of when everybody's got his or her vaccine, then people will start traveling again, and then people won't be accepting virtual kind of Zoom calls anymore. And I think we should all, as an industry, make sure, also from an ecological impact point of view, we all love traveling, but we should kind of limit and keep the benefits of the change in the industry. And I'd like that to actually continue to level the playing field for everyone out there fundraising.
And Patric?
Yeah, 2 things. The first one, echoing what Shruti said again, we've seen 30% of the VC firms that we have backed with at least one female partner. I like to see that ratio significantly improved next year. And the second element that I'd like to be able to communicate on more clearly is what EIF would have done by then, together with the European Commission and the EIB, concretely to improve the landscape. So I'm really trust that in 12 months' time, I'll be able to tell you about the very specific measures that we would have undertaken to tackle that inequality on the VC and private equity market.
And finally, Elina.
Yeah, I would also like to see more public money being a source of capital and a trendsetter going to female-led or mixed-gender VCs, because I think this in turn will encourage more female VC investors to emerge and more female-founded startups to be born. And I would also like to see those female or mixed-gender startups double in the next year. And I will collect the data and see how many of those that we've analyzed have been female or gender mixed or mixed gender, and then see next year if that's increased or doubled.
Brilliant. First of all, I know that we got to the end of the panel, but there are some questions left that some of us, at least I know, can stay a few minutes more, and I know that some need to go. So I understand that some of you need to say goodbye at this point because you have other obligations, but thank you very much for being on the panel. Can some of you still stay just to answer 2 or 3 more questions? Anyone can stay? Elina, yes, you're nodding. Patric, can you stay another
until 6? Yes, just a couple of minutes.
All right. All right. So thank you very much for those that need to go. Thank you very much for everyone. Thank you, Gregor. Thank you, Shruti. And let me jump. Thank you. And let me just jump to the questions. So one question is just here. Do you think there's a difference in the diversity approaches between smaller and larger funds like Sequoia? Maybe Patric, can you start? What do you think?
Again, without having made a statistical analysis, but just from my personal observation, I tend to think that the larger fund, those which are more established on the European VC scene, seem to be more aware of the concern and seem to be the most active ones in promoting a change of the landscape. And they are doing so notably by increasing the number of female partners that they have in their partnership. So I think that these are the ones who will be the quicker one to reflect their own profiles in the entrepreneurs that they're backing.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of larger funds versus first-time funds or second-time funds, because that's still an emerging manager, what do you think, Elina?
To agree with Patric, I think larger funds are more aware of this. They need to change and they need to have more diverse teams, not only in terms of female investors, but also in terms of background, race, etc. The smaller funds still, I think, need to catch up on that.
And there's a question, are there any particular lessons for first-time GPs that can be drawn? Elina, do you think there's anything you can share in terms of lessons learned?
That's a tough question. I think one lesson that I guess male partners in VC funds can learn is just not really learn, but be aware of, is that those female founded or mixed gender founded startups would prefer to go to VCs that have a female partner. So maybe that will change their mind in terms of their composition of the team and to become more diverse and include different types of backgrounds and gender, race, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
It looks like we've lost Kinga.
I think maybe they cut us off. Let's see if she'll join.
Indeed, let's wait a minute or so.
Oh.
Yeah, hi, Patric. Hi, Elina. No, we for sure did not cut you off. I see Kinga is joining, so yeah.
Okay.
Something happened there. Hopin had a... and so yeah, I guess...
Yeah, you can continue.
Thank you. I guess we're kind of going to right to the end. I guess there's a question around finding female-led companies in general as a strategy. And I guess, you know, from what I've been reading a lot on this topic is that female-led companies are now the hot thing, solving the new projects and the new issues and challenges, but still perhaps Central Europe is still not the place for so many of them. London seems to be, for example, a place where femtech is developing big time these days. How do you find more female-led companies? This is more for Elina, I think, than for Patric, unless Patric has some views also from his VC portfolio, but maybe Elina.
To be honest, I think a lot of the female founders come to us because there are not that many VCs, as I mentioned, that have a female partner. And so a lot of them feel like they can click with and be understood better by a team that has a female investor in them. So we have a lot of inbound traffic to us. In terms of outbound and going and actively looking for female or mixed startups, we actually are part of a network, Women in VC, European Women in VC. We try to go through those networks and associations to tap into those female founders and mixed founders. So
that's right. Brilliant. Okay, and one final question. It's about hiring. Patric, what is the situation on hiring, say, from even bottom up or project leaders? What is your strategy at EIF, perhaps? Because that's also interesting to see how to get more females into these investment roles from the LP perspective. So can you talk a bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. I can tell you, I can speak on behalf of the VC team that I'm co-managing at EIF, and I can tell you that this is a core focus in our recruitment process. And what has been said earlier in the panel, that we should start in the recruitment process, ensuring that we're filling up the team with junior profiles who have the opportunity, not the opportunity, but the possibility to climb the ladder in the next coming years. Is something that we're paying a particular attention to. This being said, we should also think about the opportunity of launching dedicated campaigns and putting maybe more forward our willingness to improve the gender balance within our team. As a matter of fact, we have launched a number of campaigns in the last quarter and this quarter, and I have to say that the vast majority of the CVs which are landing in our mailboxes are from male profiles. So there is something that we need to do to improve that ratio, and at least in the CVs which are landing on our desk, we would need to see an improvement of that balance, so that we have more chances and more likelihood to find the right profiles and right female profiles who would suit our needs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that takes us to 6 o'clock. I know that everyone is super busy with all their other obligations, so it's been really a pleasure to having both of you, Elina and Patric. Thank you very much for finding the time to talk about this important topic, and looking forward to being in touch. Thank you so much, 0100.
Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you very much for joining. See you around.
Joseph.
Thank you. Bye.